Good afternoon, my friends. This is Paul, and today I'm going to be re-reviewing Fire Emblem Radiant Dawn for the Wii, this time with video footage, because that was easier said than done the first time. So, as most of you know, this has to be one of my favorite video games currently, and by far my favorite Fire Emblem. But what really irks me is that so many people seem to think that this is either unappreciated or just flat out terrible. This was actually my best friend's first Fire Emblem that he played, and he thought it was a masterpiece, even though he hadn't played its prequel, Path of Radiance. So I said, well, you know that Game Informer only gave this game a 7, right? And he's like, a 7? It deserves a 9! I said, well, they said that the story was bland and predictable. He's like, it's anything but bland and predictable. And I said, oh, and they also said it was too hard. And he's like, well, did they play on easy? I said, they probably didn't. So I think a lot of the hatred for this game comes from people not playing it in the order intended. You're supposed to start on easy and move from there. But let's take things one step at a time first. So, grumbling aside from this game's ratings and its very low sales that nearly killed the franchise, this is a magnificent turn-based strategy RPG that basically has probably made more advancements in moving the Fire Emblem series forward than any other entry. While it's true that Awakening and Fates brought Fire Emblem to a more casual audience, this one was basically, okay, let's take everything that works from Path of Radiance and let's just amp it up considerably. The story is grander and more magnificent than ever, with by far the most chapters and the biggest world out of any Fire Emblem to date. Every little place, from the back alleys of Navasa to the country of Goldoa, all of them contribute something to a massive plot that was already massive in the previous game, and it just takes it a whole step forward. One of the coolest things about this entry is that you're constantly shifting perspectives. While part 1, you start out by controlling the Daeon army, which, to put that into perspective, is the army that was your enemy in the previous game. You're now controlling them and seeing things from their perspective. You might have thought of Ike as this amazing hero in the previous game, but they think that Ike is a ruthless tyrant general that forced all of them into near starvation. And so it really makes you question, like, okay, so who is the good guy? Who is the bad guy? And you never get a satisfactory answer to that question until you get to the very end of the game. And even then, you start pondering, was I controlling the enemy the whole time there? So, I'm playing this on the Wii U, which is not the recommended way I would pick to play it. Sure, the image quality is ever so slightly better than it is on the original Wii, but at the downside, you can't use GameCube controllers, and since the game doesn't support the nunchuck, playing this with the Wii Remote sideways is kind of a pain. If you're just moving around and clicking, that's no problem. But Fire Emblem requires more than that. You have to check enemy stats, you have to move in and out the camera, change angles, and usually that involves simultaneous button presses, and you know what happens when you simultaneously press buttons. Sometimes the controller might not read all of it accurately. Thankfully, since I only captured footage of the first couple of levels because I didn't want to do too much spoilers, that didn't really pose a problem to me, but I could see long-term play sessions becoming rather grating, especially when the players wonder, why can't I just use the nunchuck? In fact, this game actually gets rid of motion controls altogether. This is one of the few Wii games that says, okay, we're not going to let it be limited by the fact that it's on the Wii. We're going to focus first and foremost on making this a good Fire Emblem game. Now, I know people complained about that when the 3DS stopped having 3D, but the 3D wasn't essential to the gameplay a lot of the times and could be turned off. Most Wii games could not. You either played with motion controls or you didn't play the game at all. Whereas with this game, they just said the game doesn't need motion controls. It's fine with just a traditional GameCube controller. which most people seem to love anyway. In addition to that, while this game does require you to take a very linear path to the end, going from point A to point B, it does give you a lot of options to offset the difficulty. This is definitely not a newbie-friendly entry into the franchise. I don't know what my best friend was thinking this was his first Fire Emblem. But it does more than you think to make sure that you have a fighting chance. Just to name a few examples that they give, sometimes you'll get an overpowered unit that'll help you out for a level. Once you gain access to the base, which is basically the equivalent to the world maps in later Fire Emblems, then you can give out bonus experience. However, the difference between this and games like Awakening are that the bonus experience isn't unlimited. You have to earn it, and you can earn that by, say, completing the level in as few turns as possible, sparing innocent people that don't have weapons, and overall the game rewards you for morality first and foremost. You're not a ruthless killer. You're here to save people. And so that's why the game encourages you to go as fast as you can, instead of wiping out every enemy possible to milk out the experience. That being said, you might have to play this game at a bit of a slower pace than you're used to because experience is so hard to come by. You might have to chip away at an enemy's health slowly instead of defeating them in the usual 2 hits, because that'll be the best way to maximize the experience distribution. And so overall, it feels like this game is way more strategy heavy than some of the more modern Fire Emblem games. Because with those, you could just keep grinding on an optional level until you got your units to what you wanted. Not in this game. You have to take what the game gives you and make the most of it. So in other words, maximizing efficiency, which is a phrase I never thought I would hear in a Fire Emblem game again. Now, one of the problems, even if people do watch this review and say, "Wow, you know what, Paul? You've actually convinced me to give this gem a try." Yeah, well, good luck not only finding it, but finding it at a decent price. Nowadays, game retailers sell this for $100 or more, and if you're lucky, maybe along the $70 price range. To put that into perspective, as of the time of this recording, that's even more expensive than a brand new first-party Nintendo Switch game. So the fact that a Wii game from 2007 costs more than the average Switch or Wii U game, that's just depressing. And Path of Radiance is even worse, let alone if you can find the disc in good condition. I really wish that maybe this game could get a remaster treatment, because it does have some amazing production values during the cinematics, but it also suffers from horrendously bad voice acting, and the texture work is kind of muddy even by Wii standards. However, it has the typical Nintendo level of polish, where you do get nice humorous moments to break up the depressing subject matter, even if it's not overstating its welcome. Now, I'm not going to pretend that this game is absolute Fire Emblem nirvana, because it definitely has problems. And the problems have definitely been addressed in other games. It's just that on a game this grand, it's amazing how they can make just such subtle mistakes. For instance, supports have to be the worst I have ever seen in the entire series. I mean, unlike Shadow Dragon, they actually have supports. But when they occur, it's kind of just, "Hey, I got your back. Aw, thanks for looking out for me." That's it. In games like Awakening and Path of Radiance, you'd have full conversations with your support partner, and that would give you great benefits in battle. The trade-off is that the support benefits really come in handy here. Pretty much without them, you're going to be toast in these battles. In fact, one support party, Ziark and Volug, they have such good support that they can dodge nearly every attack that comes at them once they're fully supported. I don't think even Awakening has that level of awesomeness, but then again, this doesn't have the pair-up mechanic. There are also elements of strategy that for some odd reason never made their way back into a mainline Fire Emblem game. For instance, terrain elevation leads to a nice level of, okay, if I'm higher up than the enemy, then that'll give me a higher percentage. but climbing up a level of terrain will also decrease my movement. So again, I have to maximize efficiency. Shoving was also removed, which can sometimes make a huge make or break deal in a situation. There's also the whole subcategory of Lagoo's units, which are like half human, half animal. So then you have to micromanage how long do you want them to stay human, how long do you want them to stay an animal. Also, they have their own subculture, which plays really well into the plot. And while Lagoos are a pain to upgrade, it's still a really cool concept that I definitely wish Fire Emblem would explore more, apart from make sure your dragon stone doesn't run out. Oh wow, I am so mesmerized by that. That's just amazing. Also, the story. Now, admittedly, I could see how if some people played the first couple of chapters with the Dawn Brigade, they may be wondering, Paul, where do you get the idea that this game is so grand? And yes, I will agree that the opening chapters do start out kind of slow and sometimes maddeningly difficult if you don't know what you're doing. But once you get past that and you start seeing alternate perspectives, especially once Ike finally shows up, that's when the game really starts hitting its stride and stays at a high note basically the rest of the game. This has one of the most epic and appropriately drawn out finales I have ever seen in a video game. It really makes you feel like you are about to take on the ultimate mastermind, and you feel like you earned it with every fiber of your being. It was because of your decisions, your careful planning. You didn't grind, you didn't do optional missions, you took what the game gave you and you maximized the efficiency. And while some people may prefer the grind-heavy approaches of later Fire Emblems, that's totally okay. However, I would ask you to really think, did I feel satisfied knowing that I did an artificial system of leveling up as opposed to natural progression? Do I feel as though not giving the units the right amount of skills was worth it? Do I feel like my lack of forging weapons hurt the game at all? Now, this may seem archaic in other departments. For instance, after playing Fire Emblem Echoes, it's kind of hard to go back to the fact that this game doesn't have voice acting except in the cinematics, which is really a shame because this game's story has some very poignant moments that just don't translate very well with cardboard cutouts and really poorly animated map NPCs. Thankfully, this game has a lot of options, which has been a given in any Fire Emblem game. But say you can turn combat animations off, you can choose the speed of the game. No, I am not editing the speed of this footage. I like things to be snappy and fast, and the game gives me that option. The game's music is also kind of a disappointment. I don't think that'll affect your enjoyment of the game by any means, but while the music is atmospheric, it's not orchestral, which is a shame because Path of Radiance managed to have an absolutely stellar soundtrack, and this game just feels like a step backwards. For as grand as it is, it's kind of hard to get used to those MIDI trumpets when you're supposed to be storming into the enemy camp. Although, the track The Devoted that you might know from Smash Brothers that plays during Ike's battle theme is absolutely priceless, with or without MIDI. Overall, I could fanboy about this game for eons, but to spare you the boredom, I think I'm going to stop here and just let the comment section do the talking, because I feel like people need to look at this with more of an objective eye. And you know what? Maybe because this is my favorite Fire Emblem, maybe I'm overlooking critical flaws that I don't mind, but they'll turn you off. What I would recommend is at least get past the Dawn Brigade. Once the game changes to the Dayan Liberation Army, the game really steps up its game and develops an amazing story that's world-spanning, epic, unpredictable, and like I said, it even makes you second-guess the morality of all of your choices. So with that, thank you very much for watching. Again, if you have any questions, leave them in the comments. Hope you can get this game for a good price. If you have to pay $100 for it, personally I think that's worth it, but whatever, that's just me. And enjoy your Fire Emblem. Bye!